Now, I know it, so let's just address it. Let's get it over with. A lot of you are going to take to the comments in this video and be like, oh, all of a sudden he's turned on his guy. Remember back in 2015, 2016, in that draft, he was a Carson Wentz nut hugger. In the first couple of years he was. And you're absolutely right. I was. And those first couple of years, I looked pretty damn good, right? Then the next 4 seasons happened from 2018 to 2021, and oopsie daisies. You can't win them all. Sure, it's great to be right, but it's also important to acknowledge when you're wrong. No, you know what? It really isn't. Because when you think about sports specifically and media in general, it's all about shock value and reaction. It really doesn't matter if you're fucking right or wrong. So many of you watch people in sports and in like political media that are consistently wrong regularly, and you stan them, and it makes no sense. But nonetheless, we're at this place now where Carson Wentz at one point in time I was all in on. And I realized after watching him the past couple of years of, yeah, he's kind of cheeks. And I don't get why teams continue to invest in the belief of Carson Wentz being 2017 version Carson Wentz when that was damn almost 5 years ago now. And somebody, I can't remember who it was on Twitter, my apologies, I would love to attribute the source, but somebody made the reference to on Twitter. Was it Andrew Brandt? If it was, I hope so. If not, please feel free in the comments to chime in like who it actually was. I think it was Andrew Brandt pointed out on Twitter that he can't recall a quarterback ever having teams give up more high draft picks to get him. And that feels right. From the big trade up for Philadelphia in that 2016 draft and all the picks that they had to give up to get him. Then you talk about Indianapolis and the picks they gave up to fucking get him. And now, what did you know? Captain Carson's gonna be fucking Commander Carson. The Washington Commanders, what a stupid ass name that is for a clearly stupid ass organization, have decided that, yeah, Taylor Heineke's not the dude. Okay, you can make that argument. That makes logical sense. But the answer, by God, in 2022 is Carson Wentz. Excuse me? The fuck? The actual fuck? The hell is this about? Not only are you getting Carson Wentz, but you're giving up like multiple picks for him. Why would you do that? I understand teams get quarterback desperate, and teams sometimes believe that, hey, we could do more with this guy than the previous team did. Hey, this guy comes in, we can work with him. It's kind of the arrogance of self-belief of you're better than somebody else. And there is a positive thing there, because you want to believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, nobody else is going to fucking do so. And sometimes that could be true. But I'm sorry. The Philadelphia Eagles and now the Indianapolis Colts, both without absolute clear-cut alternatives, have had the Carson Wentz experience and said, no, you know what? We're good. We're ready to move on. If other teams that have had him in the building and had him on the roster and had him on the field leading the team continue to want to trade him away, and in this case for the Indianapolis Colts, whereas the Eagles it took 5 years. The Indianapolis Colts, it took 1. You started to get into like Russell Westbrook territory of, gee, a new team is acquiring him every year, which means the team that he's on every year is trading him away. Ding dong, dumb dick. Maybe that tells you there's something fucking wrong here. Maybe you shouldn't trade for him. Like, I get that Washington feels really burned by the Dwayne Haskins selection a few years ago. That crapped out. It didn't work. It's really bad. Shit happens. And they're also probably feeling really burnt by all that they gave up back in that 2012 draft to trade up to get RG&E. Looked like initially that could be great. Ultimately, it wasn't. Again, shit happens. You cannot allow the fears from the past to dictate your path forward in the future. A life lived in fear is no life at all. whether that be your real world life or especially here in football. You have to be okay with going down a similar path, but having the confidence that this time maybe you'll get it right. And I realize that not many people are very high on this quarterback class in 2022, and maybe for some good reasons. But that doesn't mean that you refuse to invest in that position. Just because Dwayne Haskins was a fuck-up pick and was a fuck-up doesn't mean that 3 years later you keep kicking the can down the road. Like the signing of the Ryan Fitzpatricks and now the trading for Carson Wentz. You're not going anywhere doing that. Unless you're saying your goal in an expanded 17-game season is to maybe win 8 or 9 games and slide into the back door of the wild card. Which again, what are you doing? And even worse, isn't that the worst possible spot to be in football? Is mediocre, toiling right in the middle with no real potential for bottoming out, no real potential for contending for a championship? What does Carson Wentz bring to the table that is so different and so much more spectacular than what Taylor Heineke did in 2021? Seriously. Did you not watch Carson Wentz in Indianapolis this year? It's like the Washington Commanders watched that Week 18 game for the Colts against the Jaguars and said, you know what? The Colts are playing like shit. We see Carson Wentz losing to the worst team in the league, a team that was so bad that they beat the Colts the last week of the season and still ended up with the first overall pick in the draft. We want Carson Wentz. I mean, I get it. Like, every once in a while you get this tantalizing tease with Carson Wentz. And I admit I've been sucked into it too. Now, back in 2016 and 2017, there were a lot more tantalizing teases. You know, well, he would have been the league MVP if he finished out the season. You're right. He would have been. And ultimately, he blew up his knee in December, and he wasn't. And that shit was 4+ years ago. It is time to move on from that perception of what Carson Wentz once was to acknowledge what he is. And what he is a guy that for some reason is getting a third opportunity to be somebody's starting quarterback for reasons that are unbeknownst to anybody with a logically functioning brain. For what? I don't get it. And I wish, just from the standpoint of how big of an advocate I was for him 5 or 6 years ago, I wish Carson Wentz was better than what he is. But you can't continue to get tantalized by an almost 30-year-old quarterback and the potential of what you think could be there and completely and totally ignore the reality of what actually is. This is not like the Rams trading for a Matthew Stafford. And even that situation where you say, well, their Super Bowl opponent was a team that drafted their starting quarterback. That's right. Like, that's still the way ideally you want to build a team. You can do it a different way, but it's rare. But even if you want to point to the Rams traded for Matthew Stafford. Yes, the Rams also had guys like Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, Leonard Floyd, and others on that defense. And on offense, they have one of the very best wide receivers in the damn league in Cooper Kupp. Had the opportunity to bring in Odell Beckham Jr. off the scrap heap. Their offensive line was still pretty good. Like, it wasn't like Matthew Stafford alone fixed shit. They already had a lot of infrastructure built in place. The Washington Commanders have none of that. You have Terry McLaurin, who's nice. Antonio Gibson in the backfield, who's solid. But who do you have at wide receiver outside of McLaurin? Exactly. You have nothing at tight end to speak of. Your offensive line is good, but you're going to bring everybody back on that unit for 2022. And then you look at defensively. You've invested all of that draft pick capital currency into that defensive front, and your defense sucks donkey dick. Is Carson Wentz going to make that better? That's what I don't get here. It's like if the Washington Commanders had a situation where they had the absolute worst quarterback play in the league and they were a 10 or 11 win team in 2021, you could make an argument that, hey, bringing in Carson Wentz, giving up a couple of day 2, day 3 picks, maybe that's their best chance. Maybe they have a shot. But you can't say that. Can you even honestly say at this point that Carson Wentz serves as any type of sizable upgrade over Taylor Heineke? The answer is no. No. You're just shaking it up for the sake of shaking shit up. And I don't get it. You're basically bailing out the Colts here. That's what you're doing. Teams around the league should have said, no, we're not going to trade for him. Have a little goddamn discipline and force the Colts' hand. And if you then had interest in Carson Wentz, maybe once he gets released, you can actually go out there and try to acquire him in free agency and keep some of your damn draft pick capital. And you know what? If it doesn't work out, it's probably for the better! The Washington Commanders better hope to God this freaking works out. Because you can only kick that quarterback can down the road so much, and that's all this is. And Carson Wentz better hope this works out, because this is his one last chance. This is his one last chance. If he's not great in Washington, it's over for him as a starting quarterback in this league. You might as well wrap that shit up. But I can't imagine being a Washington Commanders fan right now, and A, being excited about that ridiculous-ass sounding name, B, being excited about this deal. Why? For what?